Assalamu alaikum dear audience, hope you would be fine. Today we would be discussing post-colonial urban outcasts, city margins in the South Asian literature. This is an edited collection of the different chapters by Madhurima, Madhurima Chakraborty and Umme Al-Wazdi. So it's very interesting with reference to the literature of the margin and the marginalized. Uh, the city of metaphor has been defined as, in the neo-empirical sense, post-colonial urban outcast city margin in the South Asian literature is the name of the book. So it is the collection of literary criticism and different anthologies, mean different chapters are in it, and which focuses on the discontents in the cities. It is an attempt to investigate how South Asian literature and the literature about South Asian, this is very important, means literature, South Asian literature, which is written by the people of the South Asia, and the other literature means which the other people write about South Asia. For example, if an Englishman writes something about Pakistan or India, so he would be an English people, but he would be writing literature about South Asia, and the people who are from the South Asia and that they themselves write, they are called the South Asian literature. So these are basically two different concepts: South Asian literature and the literature about South Asian. So South Asian literature is written by the people from the South Asia, and the literature about South Asia is written by someone else. And they talk about the urban margins, means urban usually is the metaphor like used for city people, for the centers, for civilized centers. So urban margins, the word in this word urban and margin, there are two different things. Urban is civilized, and still that urban, that center hold its margins, that urbans, in the very next slide I'm going to just give you an short introduction in Urdu language of another novel of Arvind Adiga, which is about margin and the center and urban margins in the India. So first we let complete this introduction. They might be means that margins might be spatially means from the geographic point, from psychological separation and the depression. They might be the sexually gendered. For example, if someone is black, so if someone is the female, someone is the disabled, so sexually they also have, and socio-politically, for example, if there are some belonging of some minor political ideology. For example, if like Sikh in India are more likely, and from Sikh more the Parsi are more marginalized. So if they might be socially and politically marginalized people. For this reason, post-colonial urban outcast, outcast more referably to the margins, to disempowered people, untouchable, not in the sense of untouchable, but outcast means those who have those do not enjoy the power in the center, they are called outcast. Brings together chapters that emphasize Myriad's critical approaches, geospatial, urban theoretical, and diasporic and subaltern. So these means geospatial means with reference to some geography. Urban theoretical means they might be included and excluded within the city. They might be living in the city, but for example, if I talk in every city, for example, I talk of Multan. In Multan, the area of Kent is very specialized area, and the people who live near to Matital Road or the other areas, they are less developed. Similarly, if we talk about the Laya, the people living in the housing colony are more specialized rather than the people living in Mahalla Eidgah. And Similarly, in every city, for example, even in Islamabad, there is the area of Kachiabadi where might be the people are living in Islamabad, but they are not enjoying as social status and well-groomed, civilized facilities as the people living in the center of Markaz 11 enjoy. And then diasporic people, those who have migrated in that city, and the other one, those are the subalterns. So major argument of this book is, which we have to keep in mind, is that the post-colonial urban outcast is fueled primarily by a critical skepticism, one that it is invested in interrogating the margins of the cities. This is the most important, that this book basically focuses on the critical skepticism means critical knowledge, critical understanding. Skepticism means rationalism, which focused interrogates the margin of the cities. Every cities have its margins. In every city, even one city marginalized in another city. For example, we have always talked about, if we Pakistani, for example, we usually talk about that Lahore is more preferable, Lahore is more civilized rather than the Karachi. We always prefer that Islamabad is more civilized rather than the Lahore. So simply one city marginalizes in another city, and every city has its margins on geopolitical, geospatial grounds, on psychological grounds, and social grounds. And for that, it's not just means that things happen so naturally. Nothing is natural. City captures the thing. It adopts the exclusionary practices from the center to the margin, convinced that there are many urban exclusionary practices that find expression in South Asian literature. So, the post-colonial urban outcast recognize the urgency of addressing and solving the problem of city peripheries. This is, basically the voice to resist those exclusionary powers which the center adopt against the peripheries, and unequal citizenship. This is very interesting. The very interesting, if you could understand the word, this unequal citizenship, I mean they are equal citizens, but still they are unequal. The same is the case in Pakistan. Means, for example, if you talk about the Rajanpur, then you might be having an understanding that the people who live in Diji Khan, the people who live in Rajanpur, they are marginalized. It's called the domiciled politics. Domiciled politics, which you do just so you see the domicile. Means still, is it not interesting that we still have a national identity card and still we are holding our domicile politics? Means once, I think that there is no need of domicile. When we have a national identity card number, then there should not be the need of any domicile. But still that is being practiced. Just whenever you see the domicile, you just label that person, that he might be the center, he might be the person from the center or from the periphery. By solving this is a voice, basically critical thinking, that we should have to resist against this ongoing politics of marginalization against the peripheries. So this unequal citizen should be challenged, and this is the major argument of the book. Our general focus is on the sustained diurnal practices rather than on erupting crisis. Here he's talking, that means we have to basically question those exclusionary practices. We are not going to resist against the eruption of the crisis. Means we are not going to minimize it. We are going to minimize it. That how this book is, as divided into four divisions. We would be talking later on that. Means what the strategies or exclusionary practices are adopted by the cities, and how we can resist those cities. What is ongoing, we cannot minimize that, put it into zero, but however we can improve those exclusionary practices and can move forward. Uh, Here is the definition of the city, to what we call the city. Edward Suja has examined and detailed the cultural turn in urban studies, means right large. Then the significance for universally and urban focus in the South Asian literature has also gained attraction in the recent scholarship. We have seen a shift away from the late 20th century theoretical focus on the nation and nationalism. Means nation and nationalism has created cities. uh, I may talk it on longer as well. Nation and nationalism. From this concept of nation and nationalism, we have developed our myths of superiority. For example, in the 20th century, when the different countries were getting independence, uh, then the division of the nations into geographies has been the result of that traumatic massacres, killing in the during the partition in Pakistan. This all happened only due to nation and nationalism. If there had not been nation and nationalism so much aggravated level, there have not been the killing. So this, of course, not to say that South Asian cities themselves are somehow new or newly important, but that the importance of the urban centers as geospatial entities in the formation of South Asian culture lives in the reviewing more critical attention. Means due to this concept of nation and nationalism, there have been an aggravated sense of cities. For example, during the partition, those who were from Delhi, they were proud of being in the Delhi, and those who were in Lahore, they were proud of being Lahori. So those who were across the border, they were feeling proud to be Indian, and those who were across this side of the border, they were feeling proud to be a Pakistani. So basically, this sort of energized concept of nation and nationalism created unconsciously an infused spirit in the minds of the people about cities. For example, if I'm from Laya, I'm very proud of my city. The reason behind is this, that I'm more patriotic to my country, I'm more patriotic to be a Pakistani. So definitely from that larger spirit of being a proud Pakistani, that it basically conditioned one's brain to be thinking on that line. So now I'm proud to be very proud of my city, that I'm from Laya, and someone might be the proud of his city that he's from Bonir. Someone might be proud of his city that he's from Waziristan. So like this, so this tendency has developed an aggravated sense of cities among our in our brains. Same is the case in India, as we're talking in this special reference to India. So there was that. So Renu Desai and Romala Sanyal have argued that even though urbanization grew in leaps and bounds in the post-independence India, and Indian scholarship development plans took a particularly anti-urban bias, thus generating and sustaining a gap between the lived and academic significance of the cities. Means urban and anti-urban biases. Means still we see that Pendunu Chaliye means those people, means like Wordsworthian philosophy, that the people who are living in urban areas, they, for example, if you are in the intersection of a two generation, means the younger generation more prefers to be living in the cities, and then as an anti-urbanization, the older generation would be likely to be living in the rural areas. So this anti-urban bias means there was a tendency of anti-urban biasness as well. but due to this conflict, uh, when something is accepted without any resistance, then it does not get so much critical attention. But when there is some tendency of anti urban, anti of some phenomena, then definitely the situation becomes more critical. Usually the governments do this, create pressure themselves for themselves. Government usually gives themselves tough time, and then they resolve that issue, and then they are very much celebrated in the governments, by the public. Similarly, in his convincing and compelling introduction to the two-volume Oxford Anthology of Modern Indian City, Vinay Lal argues that although critical attention has not always reflected this, the importance of city is not in fact a modern or relatively new happenstance. City in India is as old as the Indian civilization. Means the concept of civilization, city and urban has been since the long in the Indian civilization. But for example, you give importance to the cities. For example, there would be a movement that if you want to get education, then you have to move city. If you want to do your good business, then you have to move to the city. If you want to have a good transportation, then you have to be city. If you want to have good interaction with the people, then you should have to move cities. This is what who creates this move? Those who are capitalists, those who wants to rule over others, they create such senses. Then definitely in this move, the people from the urban rural areas would be coming in the urban areas, and then the people who are well settled in the urban areas, they would be exploiting those people at the less labor. Sexually they would be manipulating those. All this would be happening. So the capitalists, means those who are the city holder, who wish to celebrate the city and urban life, they create such moves for the people to be coming in the city. And definitely when the people would be coming in the city, when there would be a lot of rush, when the people from different cheaper labor, then they would be exploiting the cheaper labor. The same is the case with, for example, England. As the people from India and Pakistan are coming over there, then those people who are from India and Pakistan, they are Bangladesh, they work on £5 per hour, while the people who are over here, they do not work less than £15 per hour. Then definitely an Englishman more focus on the people who are coming from Bangladesh, from India, from Pakistan, because they exploit the cheap labor. For Lal, urban existence has always been the defining feature of Indian life, but it is not only recently that the scholarship has made attempt to catch up. So one thing is that the concept of the sense of city is as old, but with the with the concept of aggravated concept of nation and nationalism, it has developed more during the partition. So first we define the word urban outcast. Who can be an urban outcast? Describe those on the receiving ends of exclusionary practices. One are the subalterns, and others are the you apply the exclusionary practices against some particular section of the society, and those the receiving end, on those the exclusionary practices are exerted, those who feel such discriminations are the urban outcast. Then there are definitely different levels of those outcasts. For example, if we talk about India, there are four social, religious categories: Brahman, Shudra, Kshatriya, and then untouchables. Similarly, for example, if people migrate into the city, then severely, the most severe exclusionary practice is adopted against, for example, in our society, against the Christians. They do work of very cleansing gutters like this. So in Pakistani society, Christians are the urban outcasts. They are living in the cities, they are cleaning our hospitals, and they are cleaning our streets. So therefore they are the urban outcasts. Still they are living in the cities, but they are the urban outcasts. uh, the term outcast, we mean to highlight the relationship between the contemporary marginalizing acts and the long standing practice of alienating entire communities from access to social, economic, and political power that has prominently been part of the Hindu caste system in India. Although, of course, there are the iterations of the outcast somewhere elsewhere, means in Pakistan, there is also, although only some of the chapters in our collection deals directly with Dalit. Dalit means those are the untouchables. Representation, we will find in the term outcast a useful or a link to outcast, and the phonetic emblem of the longevity of the exclusion and marginalization is there. Our focus on the marginalized urban communities is related to, but ultimately different from, gauging cities developmentalism, means the concept of developmentalism. This is what means city, developed city, and not yet city, means here lies the gap. So to which we define as the city, the for that the gauging measure is the developmentalism, means there are some cities who are named as the cities, but they are not developed. Therefore people are not as much willing to go over there. For example, people are more prefer, I am actually using the Pakistani context, so people from any rural area prefer to come to Islamabad and Lahore rather than going to Sakkar and Hyderabad. So usually as the third word, mega cities, that is understood to be the lacking in the qualities of cityness, such as effective governance, service production, etc., that might presumably characterize a more so-called first world city. So in those cities there are the first world city, second world city, and the third world cities, means definitely developed, developing, and the underdeveloped are the less developed. In other words, so similarly as the people developed, underdeveloping, and less developed, similarly are the cities developed, first world cities, developing, and underdeveloped. Cities also adopt the exclusionary practices against the underdeveloped or the third world cities as well. In other words, while the mega city of the global south might seem to own the underdevelopment or developmentalism associated with it, the global cities rely on exactly the same cheap labor and resources for its own success. So Roy characterizes such developmentalism as a necessary condition of the cities of the global south. This global south is being talked about the India, and the South Asian megacity. We find it more productive to emphasize instead the practices that underlie urban inequality. Our emphasis simultaneously extends to this notion of the developmentalism by contemplating various practices of marginalization beyond economic narrows the focus on the process and the production of such inequalities. This is very important, that this book is not going to find out what sort of the exclusionary practices are adopted. The major focus of book is to gauge or to focus on the process and production of such inequalities, why the people create, how do definitely how do deals with the process, and what is produced, what is processed, that comes under the category of production. So process and production of such inequalities is the major focus of this book. It is by paying particular attention to process, practice, and action that we hope to prevent reproducing what Gin Prakash has noted as being a characteristic feature of the contemporary cultural critical examination to the city, a tendency to conclude that it is intense moment for the emergencies rather than the everyday effects of the historical situation that plagues such urban centers. Means this is more like a plague. This is more like a historical situation, as you know, in the sense of historical sense. Once someone, a mighty king ruler was ruling, but someone, as in the case of East India Company, the people came over there. They, with the passage of time, they covered the whole cities, and even they conquered the kings as well. Similarly, the people migrating from the different cities are coming to those centers, and still they those urban centers means have their marginalized practices, so it is acting like a plague against some particular people. Prakash argues that, at least in the part, the depiction of the depressing and the dire strait of the modern urbanity in the literature, for instance, being engulfed in the ecological and the social crisis seduced by the capitalist consumption, paralyzed by crime, war, class, gender, racial conflicts. All these are the conflicts which are being practiced by the modern city, by the mega cities against some particular section of the people, is a mode of representation that is not entirely new, and instead, since the turn of the 20th century, dystopic images, utopic images are the very ideal one, and the dystopic are the very worst one, have figured prominently in literary, cinematic, and sociological representation of the modern city. So where there are the cities are the beautiful, there are also dystopic as well. Where there are the facilities, there is also the prostitution, war, crimes, class struggle. Even people are more racist like that. The term urban outcast encompasses not only the people who are alienated. This is the definition of outcast from the power in and through cities, but the cities themselves that remain consistently marginalized. Means never, it's not means outcast does not focus to the people, it also focus to the cities. There are some cities who themselves does never migrate, improve themselves. So some cities keep themselves definitely, as cities cannot improve them by themselves. So the people living in those cities, they also remain themselves as outcast, and their city also remains at outcast, remains consistently marginalized in the literary imaginaries of the South Asian. For example, if I'm supposed to be talked about India, so the one city which I know, two or three names I know: Kerala, Hyderabad, and some more, Delhi, two or three cities which I remember, and with every person is the case like this. So I have never been in the Delhi, but I consider that Delhi might be the more superior and the good city rather than rest of the India. Means except Delhi, I consider, I have in my mind that the whole India is like a dark or uncivilized country. Similarly, they consider that Lahore and Islamabad is the only good cities. The rest of the whole Pakistan is living in the dark. So post-colonial urban outcast analyzes a heterogeneous set of practices. Hetero means different sort of practices are adopted against the cities, against the persons, against the castes. So this is it's more heterogeneous practice. Following the theories of Edward Suja and Michael Foucault, whose respective concept of third space, this third space has been talked about Homike Bhabha as well, as he talks that third space, the people who live in the third space, they are the marginalized one, and they have a special power to restructure the center. And the heteroportia insist on binary confounding understanding of the cities. Our collection argues that urban outcasts are similarly and increasingly characterized in the South Asian literature, not always as the victim or the revolutionaries, but as negotiators. This is very important. And the strategies of these complex cityscapes means those who are the marginalized one, they work as navigators, negotiators. They navigate between the the lowest end and the highest end. They might be they always remain in the transitional phase. They always remain in the third space. They always remain in the situation of in-betweenness. So these outcast, urban outcast, not I'm talking about outcast. Urban outcast means the person who come from the village, settled in the cities. So he always imagines the beauties of the cities, and he always keep on focusing that gap, bridging that gap between his urban and rural life. So who is the most sufferer? Definitely, to some extent, is that displaced immigrant in the city, as he cannot enjoy an equal status in the city as the people well settled in the cities are enjoying, and he neither remains to his own roots and boots from where he has been coming. So in this, our collection follows the critical terrain, that is the rift between with the myriad interpretation. Myriads means in order of that importance of the political potential and the character of urban disenfranchisement. So he is the subject of urban disenfranchisement, especially in the so-called developing and the third world or the global south cities. For instance, Nelson, intending to quell the fear that new migrants in the cities into the cities from rural spaces in the developing nations are essentially disruptive to existing urban political structures. I would be making more it clear. One is called the immigrant phobia. In that, people thinks immigrant is basically when you are moving from one country to another country. For example, people sitting in London are more afraid of facing the situation of immigrant phobia. They consider that if people are coming from India, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Africa, they would be making a situation of competition in our country. They would be generating more unemployment to our country. So they are very biased to the people who are coming from the third world country. They want to be die in starvation, but they are not going to accept the people from the third world. Same is the case with the cities. For example, why the life in Islamabad is so much costly, only because more people are migrating to over there. For then automatically the prices over there, prices of the properties are more increased, as everyone wants to live in Islamabad. Therefore the prices are very high. I thought that you might be understanding what I mean by that. So the new migrants into the cities from the rural spaces in the developing nations are essentially disruptive to the existing urban political structures. Hypothesize instead that, among other things, the material demands of everyday lives forestall any true long-term commitment to radicalization among the urban poor, although there is the potential for them to starve of alienation and be integrated into the political system. Consequently, through the political mobilization of the urban poor, thus challenge the political system of developing nations. This is very important. That political mobilization, this is very I never cast political statements, but one of my friends said that, as youngsters were not given the value in the political systems, and as the casting vote, the age of casting vote was reduced to 18, and the young people who national identity card, they gave vote to Imran Khan, and therefore he was got selected as he is the leader of the youth. Therefore, means the voter of Imran Khan is more than of the age from 18 to 23. So I don't agree with this logic, but his reason was like this. So means those urban outcasts, for example, uh, and they might be uh, you know as are not the well settled, they can be, their loyalties cannot be uh, to any one side. Interestingly, I would be sharing one of my own life experience over you. I was here in the University of Exeter, and there were some voting. There means about the students. So I was going to any of those groups. I was for a short term period, but I was eligible to cast a vote. So both contacted to me, and I was confused to whom I should give the vote. For example, if 100 or 1,000 people are of my nature are in the university, and they uh, cast their vote uh, without any reason, without any affiliation, they might be the short-term students, but their votes are going to bring big changes on those political on those casting vote casting system as well. Similarly, the people, for example, Asad Umar is from the territory of Islamabad. He has elected the National Assembly, member of National Assembly from Islamabad. So if I move over there, I am not, my vote is registered over there. How I would be casting my vote for Asad Umar or some any other political leader, I would be of no use. Where the other people would be casting, I would be casting in that situation if I'm not a staunch political worker. So my that vote would not be going to means he would be just enjoying that. I would be not enjoying as equal rights as the permanent residents of the people over there might be enjoying. This challenge is not the contaminated of the extremist or the anarchic outburst, but the evolution of the means to respond to concrete and usually moderate demands. They just get the money and give the vote as well. This sense of political moderation of the newly arrived rural immigrants, this is the what I have been talking about, into the city also finds in its echoes in the Jar Samuel's understanding of the new migrants as stranger, a hybrid form of living on the margins of the two cultures without being a full member of the either one. I would not be the full member of that one. So on the other hand, Homi K. Bhabha has repeatedly argued, most famously in The Location of Culture, this is the name of his book, that the hybrid and the ambivalent space have in fact a profound potential for meaningful resistance and restructuring the every center. So definitely they might resist as well, and they restructure as well, but both ends never happen. A immigrant living at the in-betweenness in the situation of hybrid cannot resist completely and cannot restructure completely. They just to some extent they put a stress on the center according to their own terms. Their marginal status often necessitates their resistance to the official moves to say relocate them, but their resistance does not necessarily question the existing power structure. This means their marginal status more have a power, have an impact, but they cannot necessarily question the existing power structure. They are just like a crowd, and such an ambivalent status can be empowering even if not fully revolutionary. These groups on their part accept that their activities are often illegal and contrary to good civic behavior, but they make a claim to a habitation and a livelihood as a matter of the right. They profess a readiness to move out if they are given suitable alternative sites for resettlement. For instance, this has been taken from the Politics of the Governed. So, this post-colonial urban outcast examined degrees of political progressiveness and conservatism among urban outcasts in the South Asian literature carefully, as they are in highlighting the agency of the marginalized. Agency means one's the power. They nonetheless collectively conclude that to truly recognize the agency of the population means they hold their agency, but they cannot exercise their agency for resistance and bringing change in the city. They always remains at the marginalized status. And to truly recognize the agency of the population is to acknowledge that even the marginalized will not always be the radical as one would be hope, and they may be even reproduce restrictive structure of their own even as they navigate the exclusionary system they face. Means they might be creating their own community within the larger sphere of the community. So, as you know, literature and it has always a very tendency about talking about the margins and the exclusionary practices. So Mohanty has been talking about that this might be a reasonable social whole if we talk about such exclusionary practices in our system. So this would be Mohanty has this hope for social change, social hope against talking about these and she says Mohanty says that this is more state-based violence. Means governments of these nations for their general inefficiency in curtailing this trend, including denying the severity of these acts and majoritarianism violence against minority communities, is all intended and purpose state sanctioned. This violence is more state sanctioned. In such a political oppressive climate, it is essential to mine literary and artistic production to gauge their commitment to social justice and their contribution to a reasonable social hope. So, she hopes that such aggressive exclusionary texts should be ended. That's very much necessary. This book is divided into 4 parts. The part 1 is about urban outcast, urban subaltern assembles, critique that interrogate the very nature of urban margins in the central literature. The articles are the book chapters which are dealing with this part. More focus on what does it mean to be outcast for South Asian cities. The other question they asked: how do the cities precipitate in such marginalization? Means how cities create this marginalization and how may they themselves be the victim of other kinds of marginalization. Resistance, hate begets hate. So when the city creates its marginalized people, then some people of the other people of that center are also marginalized. For example, if I am a marginalized of the city, then the people living, for example, President Asif Ali Zardari is might be marginalized from with my reference. So definitely it creates the gaps. And then if I am the victim of that marginalization, then I would be creating some other marginalized of my own. It means the people coming from my area are who are less in power and economy than me. I would be creating my own marginalized. So these questions have been asked in the part 1. And how do subaltern communities usually deals with the associated with the rural landscapes? Fear in the urban environments, which makes illusionary promises of more opportunity. It means someone is coming and he says that I am going to bring the change, be with me, I am bringing the change. So then definitely who would be the marginalized? They would be standing in that line in the line and the slogans of hope and change. Ultimately, what is the relationship between the politico-economic narratives of globally emerging South Asian cities and the dispossessed? Then definitely then they would be standing in the line for buying sugar. So the next chapter, part 2, deals with the national, the global, and the diasporic. Contains the chapters that analyzes, those people who are living as diasporic, means outside. They still hold a relationship with their country. Means, for example, the people from India who are living in England or in America, they might be, always keep focusing on their house, their sense of home, their nations. So the chapter number 2 discuss with these following questions. How the South Asian cities stand in relation to the nation. In what ways are these relationships characterized as anecdotal? This anecdotal is in the sense, for example, when you take one city for the whole. Have you heard that Lahore means we use Lahore as a sense of civilization, and we prefer all the Lahore over all other the cities of Pakistan. This is called a anecdotal. Same is the case with the India, and the same is case Delhi and India, and the same is case with Dhaka. For example, we consider that Dhaka might be the all that center of that. Similarly, for example, if we use the word city Quetta, so Quetta might be the more civilized rather than the rest of the Balochistan. How do they encourage or inhabit relationship between with this diaspora? Diaspora means are the people who your community who is living outside. Conversely, how might South Asian in the diaspora construct these cities within larger narratives of the development, globalization, are the sources of authentic ethnic identities? The part 3 is more focused on the space of the margins, focus on the situatedness of the outcast in specific places. They ask the question like this: how is the very skeleton of the South Asian cities marked with buy and exclusionary politics, and how can spaces within cities provide the possibilities of emancipation from oppressive practices? Means how the cities provide the spaces. And the fourth chapter part is more focusing on the forms of urban outcasting, turns to the style, aesthetics, and the formal structure of the South Asian literature that is invested in the examination of the both what it means to be outcast and what it means to be an outcast. This is very I love this one. Means this is the examination what it means to be outcast and what it means to outcast. Means what the strategies they apply to make an outcast, and what do mean to whom you charge as an outcast. This chapter has been dealing with this one. If you have any question regarding this, you may ask me. I would be available to answer those questions in the comment section. With this, goodbye. Thank you.